Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Steve Fish from Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service. So as Louis said, we're going to talk a little bit today about fires in your community and more specifically the wildfires and the issues around those wildfires. Now, I have got a couple of bits I will put up on the screen for you to view, but it is going to be mainly me kind of chatting with you guys. But please, can you, if you've got any questions, just put them forward and let's have a bit of a discussion. Let's not wait till the end. So if something that you want to quiz me on, do that as we're going along, if you would. So wildfires, so becoming a bit more of a problem. So recent studies have shown that uncontrolled vegetation fires in the UK are becoming a more sort of common feature of late. So normally the season for wildfires would be mostly April to May. However, it's starting to become apparent now that they can be a bit of an issue all year round. Different reasons for that. Obviously, climate change does come into it, which is a whole nother debate. Obviously not something we're going to get into today. But when we have these particularly long dry spells with limited rain, it does dry out the vegetation, and that's when things become a state that could promote wildfires. So just looking at some data, there were 79 fires that were larger than 25 hectares in 2018, and then that increased to 137 fires for 2019, and again it was matched in 2020. For us as a fire service, in 2020 was one of our really big resource heavy fires down at Kingswear in South Devon. So just to give you a bit of an idea, something like that for us. So that destroyed 2.5 square hectares of coastal woodland, and it took just under 70 hours for it to be extinguished. So that is a really big incident for us to deal with. And we're looking at over 1,200 personnel hours to deal with that incident. That is 48 fire engines. We've got 15 special appliances. We had a helicopter there, all to take this under control. So for us as a fire service, these type of incidents are a massive, massive draw and very, very resource heavy. And obviously all the resources we send to an incident such as that, we're then having to backfill fire stations to deal with our day-to-day incidents as well. So it makes it very, very difficult for us to sort of crew other stations when a lot of personnel are sort of taken to one particular job, such as a wildfire. So the communities that you guys are from, has anybody experienced any of these wildfires in the areas that you live?
Nick, do you want to just, I don't know if you want to just explain a little bit about your experience?
I think people will probably remember back as early as February that there was a large fire up on the moor, and probably about 2 or 3 miles from here. But of course, because it was moorland and there were no roads, the fire guys did their best, but they were unable to extinguish it directly.
And that's a really good point. So moorland is very, very difficult for us. Not only is the terrain difficult for us to manage it and to move across, but when there's a lack of roads, because we look at roads as natural fire breaks, so we can look at fighting the fires on the moorland and using the roads as natural fire breaks, and then we can try to put in our temporary ones as well. And again, logistics and communications for that type of incident are very, very pressing. So, yeah, sorry, Ruth.
Yeah, we had same. I'm from Lidford, so we had the same. We had the moorland fire just over that way.
Yeah.
And now we weren't too worried about it in the village because we've got the A386 and it acts as a brake coming to us. But it stayed more above the ridge. But one of the things that we started to notice already with that was during that first night, people were starting to complain about the smoke in the village. And that's the one of the reasons I attended this was because we were sort of thinking, oh, what happens if it had come further down the ridge and we got more smoke in the village? I wonder if it get to the stage where it started affecting our asthmatics and our people with different, breathing issues.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And the thing is as well, obviously, depending on the wind direction and the changeable wind direction, those areas that are kind of affected by the smoke can change during the incident. So that is a really good point. So we would try to get the messages out to those areas that they keep all their windows closed. That is one thing that we will say to people. Obviously, if it becomes a real issue, we would potentially look at evacuation as well and removing people from their homes. So for you as emergency planners, it would be thinking about if you've got areas of risk within your community that could harbor a wildfire or an outdoor fire. It's thinking about places that we can take people. So if there is a village hall that's available and close by to that particular area of the community. So if we did have to evacuate, then we have, we've got somewhere to take them, somewhere that's warm and comfortable to take them. And that's a real big consideration for us, because obviously we don't want to turn people out of their homes when we haven't got a safe place for them to be.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, yes.
Sorry, I was just going to chip in on that and say about the importance of having a rest shelter within your community emergency plan, but also the importance of working with your neighbouring communities and encouraging them to write community emergency plans too. Because if you find that something like this does happen nearby to you, you could, for example, say, oh, well, at the village 5 miles up the road, they do have a community emergency plan. Let's contact them and see if we can use their refuge shelter. So it's just about wider resilience as well.
And that's a really good point. So working together makes things a lot easier. And exactly as you say, so if one area doesn't have that area of safety that they can send people, maybe the neighbouring village does, and they've already got those things in place. So we can talk a little bit about some of the things that we do as a service to try and minimise these fires. So first of all, it's only around about 10 to 15% of wildfires actually start through their own nature. So a lightning strike or something like that. Can you guess how the rest of them start? The large percentage? It's us. It's the humans. Okay, so the human factors. So that's where, obviously with lightning strikes, there's nothing we can do about that as a service. But when the human factors come into it, that's the areas that we try and work to try and minimize these things happening. So one of the big things we do is use of social media. So for you as emergency planners, if you've got social media outlets within your communities that we could post some of our safety messaging on, that would be a real benefit. One of the issues we have, we can put our safety messaging out via our social media, but unless that person is on the fire service's social media sites, they're not going to see it. So it's trying to reach those people that wouldn't necessarily be looking at the fire service stuff. If there's, a monthly newsletter or the social media things you have within your communities, if we can access those as well, or you can share our information, it's a really good way of getting that message out to more people. I will just let you have a look. One of the things we did last summer was we produced, it's very basic, but we produced a poster that we shared with different organizations. A lot of them were management teams of open areas and park rangers. If I just let you have a look at this. And so this is the sort of thing that we could let you have that could be put up in your communities. Okay, have you got that one? Okay, so that was on Northern Borough, so that's quite local to where I am. So the idea of that, so it's got our badge, it's produced by us. We've also got the local authorities badge on there as well, because it's their ground, they manage that ground, and it's purely just to tell people that having barbecues and campfires are not suitable in that area. If they were to have them in that area, again, that's somewhere with a lot of vegetation that if a fire got into, could spread rapidly. And the barbecues is a real big one for us. Just let me get rid of that for you. So we do a lot of work around the barbecues and trying to discourage people from using them. So they're called disposable barbecues, but how disposable are they? So that's one of the issues we have. So if somebody takes a barbecue out into the countryside to use it, and we've had it where people have done that in a sensible way. However, they haven't always taken into consideration the wind. So we've had a barbecue that had been used that the person did raise it off the ground to stop it scorching the ground and setting fire. They did have a bucket of water, and they did also what they thought was move it away into a more open space. However, the wind picked up mid barbecue and blew some spark and ashes onto some vegetation that was a distance away, but obviously it was close enough for the wind to sort of carry that, and that did start a large fire. Now that person was trying to be responsible. However, they didn't foresee that the wind was going to pick up and blow the sparks over there. So that caused a substantial fire. Again, that was quite resource heavy for us to deal with. And the other thing around disposable barbecues as well is it's what do people do with them once they've finished? Again, we've had many fires started in the countryside by people disposing of them by chucking them in the hedge. So they've had their barbecue. The barbecues then stay hot for several hours. They'll leave them or they'll chuck them in the hedge. And again, that will start a fire very, very easily. Some areas that have, well, some areas that you are allowed to have barbecues and disposable barbecues, if they're managed in the correct way, it can work. I mean, our advice is forget disposable barbecues. If you're going to have one, then have a barbecue at home and a proper barbecue in the garden in a safe way. One of the other things that we put out, just before I speak a little bit more about barbecues, let me just share with you. This is one of our other messaging avenues, and this went out over Facebook and Twitter. Let me share that one. Again, it's very simple. Have you got that one? Okay, so that was kind of slogan that we came up with through the summer was sandwiches are safer. And we put that out through social media, and we did a little bit with local radio as well, just to try and discourage people from having these barbecues.
Sorry, Stephen, what you're sharing on your screen is just your internet browser with the YouTube.
It's the same one that you shared before, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me try again. Apologies for that. Do you have our picnic?
Yeah.
Okay, so something like that. And the idea was to come up with a catchy slogan, so sandwiches are safer, and try to discourage people from these barbecues. Because to be honest, these disposable barbecues have been the main theme throughout many of our fires. And again, that's something that we can share with you. So that is branded by us with our badge. And if that's the type of thing that you would have an avenue for within your communities, then we could let you have that. One of the other things as well is obviously holiday makers coming into the area. Now they more than likely won't be looking at local fire services websites. They don't always see our messaging. So again, if it's something you can have up within your community that people that are visiting the area will see, that could work very well too. So just going back to places that barbecues can be, or you got permission to have, it's quite good for us when places kind of prohibit the use of disposable barbecues. Some areas that do allow them, they do put in place some barbecue bins. So it's fire retardant metal bins. So they've basically got a place to dispose of the barbecue in a sensible way. One of the other things we find as well, if somebody is trying to be responsible and they want to take their barbecue home with them, there's an issue with them obviously taking a warm barbecue and putting it in the car to take it home to dispose of, in the fact that it releases quite a lot of carbon monoxide. So a barbecue releasing carbon monoxide inside your car is a very dangerous scenario. So that's the other issue with them. So they want to be responsible and not leave them lying around, but then we don't want them to put them in the car to take them home with them, not until they're fully cooled anyway, at the very least. So if that is something in your area that you allow in specific places, then to have a disposable area or a place that you can put these disposable items in, it does make a big difference. Just out of interest, do any of you have that in your communities? Maybe not.
I know in the town where I live, we do have those bins on our seafront.
Okay.
I've noticed quite a few people have actually put them in while they are still smouldering, and I don't know whether that's just because it's metal or because they'd be putting it in a normal bin like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So people have, and again, we've had fires started by them putting them in a non-combustible bin, and they're still hot, and you get troubles there. Ideally, yeah, they should be cooling them with water first. And around beach areas, the reason that these bins have been put into beach areas because people were burying them in the sand, still hot. And we've been to, or at least the ambulance has been to a few occasions where especially children have been digging in the sand and dug these things up and burnt their hands, or people have come along and walked across them because they don't put them very, deep into the sand. So again, how disposable is it? It's not. They are a real bane, to be honest. So, as I say, disposable barbecue is one of the main causes for us. It has been over the last few years. Some of the other areas that we work and some of the other messaging that we put out would be around sort of littering. So glass bottles in particular, or any glass objects that are left at the roadside, they can act as a magnifying glass, and it's been known for them to start wildfires through magnifying the sun's rays. So that's another area that we tend to focus. Obviously, discarded cigarettes as well. So people decide to flick discarded cigarettes out of the car window, or if they're smoking in the countryside, again, that is another cause. So we will send to messaging around those areas. So there was a fire also. Now this is a little bit harder to sort of work against, and it was where there was a camper van fire up on Dartmoor. So very unfortunate for the camper van owner, but their van caught fire on the roadside, and obviously being up on Dartmoor, the road runs right next to the moor, and the fire spread from the camper van into the moorland itself, and started quite a substantial moorland fire. Things like that. So, it wasn't necessarily the vehicle owner being irresponsible. It's just very, very unfortunate. But if you can carry some form of extinguishing media in your vehicle, it may be that if a small fire starts on the vehicle, that can be extinguished before it spreads to the neighboring sort of vegetation. So I'd just like to show you, as we were discussing barbecues, this is another piece of safety messaging that we put out. And again, this goes over social media outlets and can be shared by your sales within your community. So I'll just let you have a little look at this one.
Not getting anything coming up there.
Okay.
There you go.
We have that one. Okay, so we tend to try it. So that's all real footage there, real incidents that we've been to. And when you see a burnt out barbecue in the surrounding burnt area, that is an actual incident. So we find that it is better to to use the real footage and the real pictures, because that's actually, you know, what happens there. So some of the things for you to consider around anything like that happening within your community is, we kind of mentioned evacuation there. So it's thinking about where we can evacuate people to. So we've got the community halls, and maybe there's a school locally that will let you to go there as well. And then it's access. So very often we'll have to restrict access to that area. So if we're going to be closing roads and pavements, it's thinking about people that need to leave their properties, or people that need to get home. So again, if you've got an area that's potentially at risk of wildfire within your community, just think about the access to and from that area and any housing in that surrounding location. We also need to consider now, with your emergency plans, do you keep information about people with limited mobility, or of groups that may have difficulty in understanding any emergency information? Is that something that you would hold and you'd have the contact details for?
That's something that we recommend people do put in their community emergency plan.
Okay, so for us, if we're doing evacuation, it's really good information for us to be passed on. It may be that in the very early stages of an incident, before we've got all of our resources there, that you've already made contact with these people and put something in place to sort of get them to another area of safety. So ways that you can help us then, if you could identify any areas of risk within your community that may be susceptible to this type of fire, you can make us aware of that. We'd really love it if you could share our safety messaging through your outlets, and that gets it out to the wider community. Then the signs as well. If anybody would be interested in having signs to put up within their areas, that's a great way as well. And then you can report anything to us that you find, anything that you want to highlight to us, you think may be an issue within your area, you can get hold of us and update us with that so that we have that information. Any questions?
Hi, thanks very much, Steve. We do cover a certain amount of this stuff in emergency plans, but in order to regularly be updated with you, you have access to our emergency plans, I believe, but would it be simpler for you to just have a list of either community emergency leaders or Facebook sites? Because we have 2 Facebooks in our village that would welcome messages being put out, but it gets a bit cumbersome, you know, if we have too many levels and layers in the way. Would it help you to be sent Facebook sites lists?
It would be nice for us to be able to hold a list of that. Yeah, most definitely. Now that isn't something my department does, but that would be very, very helpful. And it would be a way of us getting our messages direct to you. I mean, we could run that through our comms team, so that would be much appreciated.
Who do we send it to? Who do we send it to?
What I'll do is I will pass on an email address to our comms team, and then they will be able to share that, and they'll be able to respond to you. That'd be great.
Also suggest that clerks should probably follow the fire service, and then they can always share content or retweet content that's published. And the same goes for the Environment Agency, Devon County Council, the police as well.
It's a great way, and you know, the power of social media, it really does make a difference. And we found through this pandemic, where we haven't been able to get out and engage with communities on safety issues, most of our things have been through social media, and we do get a really good pickup with it as well. So one of the other things we will do,
Ruth just had her hand up.
Sorry, Ruth, sorry.
No worries. It was just, yeah, we do retweet and send on your messages on Facebook and things, but it's who could we contact for the image files to do signs?
Sorry, Ruth, I've got something playing in my ear here.
No,
sorry, say that again.
People quite often do that, tuning out Facebook.
Yeah.
So yeah, who could we contact for like the image files so that we could print some posters? Because we Lidford, again, we get a lot of tourists. It'd be nice to put some up on.
Yeah, fantastic. So that can either come through myself, so I can leave my email address, or it would probably be easy to come through me, and then I can discuss your requirements, and I'll go through with our comms team, and then they can send direct to you.
Great, that's great.
But yeah, that'd be good. I welcome any requests like that, because the more messages we can get out there, the better.
The other thing I can do after this, but it won't be until the week after this, I'll be sending out a communication to everybody who came along, and I'll be able to share all of the resources per session. So if Steve gives me some links, then I'll be able to just include those within that will go out to everybody.
That'd be really good. I'm just going to show you another video. So this was one that was produced after a rather nasty incident on Woodbury Common back in 2017. It's got a bit of a voiceover from one of our group commanders as well that was on scene at the time. So just the idea is just to let people see how dynamic and sort of scary these incidents can be. So we'll just try and share that one. Okay, do you have that one? Fantastic.
You might need to turn the volume up on yours, Steve.
Can you not hear that one? Nothing at all?
No, can't hear the volume, unfortunately. I don't know.
Okay, it's working at my end.
Oh, 1 second. I think it might be something in my settings. Let me just double check.
Okay.
No, it's not.
So I'll just play it again. Let's see if so the picture's coming up, is it? But not the sound.
Yeah, and I think it's worth having a look at those anyway.
Yeah, it's the sound that's more important for this one. Still nothing? No, annoying.
Yeah, I think you have to on Zoom enable the sound function on it when you're playing a video. I can't remember how you do that now.
Okay,
thanks. It's in the Zoom settings.
That's what I just checked, but couldn't see it. And
on the last video I played, did you not have any sound with that one either?
No.
No. Okay, there's some dramatic music for that. Yeah, let me share the page, but it's not giving me any options for sound. Never mind. Maybe I could send you those and you can share them at another point. That's a real shame. Okay. Right, has anybody got some questions? I've got a couple more little bits here. Yes, John.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, it's just an observation really, Stephen. Just some years ago, that wasn't actually in the moorland in the southwest, it was actually in North York Moors, where I used to live up there. There was somebody had a bonfire in their garden, which backed onto the moors, and it got out of hand. It's ignited the heather, and it actually spread to the forest.
Oh, God.
It all put out eventually, but about 4 days later, I was walking across the moor with a couple of friends, and we noticed flames coming out of the ground. And it transpired that although the fire had been put out on the surface, it had actually been burning underground in the peat for 4 days.
Yep.
So the point I'm trying to make is if somebody does experience that sort of fire locally and it gets put out, it's probably worth having people go up to check for several days afterwards to make sure it hasn't, it still isn't burning.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And once the heat gets down into the peat, it does remain there for many days, and it can reignite the top surface as well. Something we would do would be to revisit that site, especially when we know it's, you know, it's a deep peated area. But it's a really good point, and it makes it very difficult for us as well. So we do have additional resources when we're fighting moorland fires. We have all-terrain vehicles, and we have fog spikes, and we use foam and things. But when it gets down into the peat, it makes it very, very difficult for us to access that and to fully extinguish it. It may be that sometimes we'll just monitor it. If we can't get there, we'll monitor over the sort of coming few days just to make sure it doesn't spread again. But it's a really good point. So one of the other things we'll do as well when we're sort of putting out our messaging is, obviously we will talk about how resource heavy it is for the fire service, so that comes with a cost, and we also take firefighter safety very seriously, because it can be quite dangerous to fight fires on moorland in some of those conditions. And if it's a wind-driven wildfire as well, they can move up to speeds of sort of like 14 miles an hour. So we've got to be very mindful of where we put our personnel, because they can get cut off, or they can have the fire front advancing towards them. And if it's coming at that kind of speed, it's obviously very difficult for them to get away. But then we also remind people, you know, the impact it has on the local community, such as you guys, and obviously the wildlife. So you get a lot of nesting birds and reptiles earlier on in the spring when some of these fires are taking place. So it's people being mindful about how much damage it causes to the wildlife, to the vegetation, and obviously the wildflowers and things are starting to bloom, you know, at that time of year. One of the other things, now I don't know if you've ever looked at this, but we do follow the Met Office's Fire Severity Index. That gives us an idea about the kind of risk in different areas depending on what the weather's been. So it will let us know if it's at a high risk. It may be that we send people out in those areas to talk to the people that live in that region and let them know. But that's something that you guys as emergency planners can access via the internet. Has anybody ever looked on that one? No, it's worth looking up. So it's the Met Office Fire Severity Index, and that will give you can localize an area, or you can look at the whole of the UK. One of the other things we do as well is, it depends, obviously a lot of these fires are caused by human behavior. So we will look at our data and we'll analyze when these fires are most likely to happen. So our messaging will kind of go around the conditions at the time. So if we have those particular dry spells, and obviously during the pandemic, when things are released and we know people are going to be out, there's more likely that these things are going to happen as well, because more people are out in the countryside trying to make the most of any ease in lockdown. So again, we centered our sort of messaging around those time periods. Although we can plan these things into our calendar, we do like to react to the current situation. So there's no point in us saying that, okay, we're going to put social messaging out in April, because that's when wildfires usually start. And then we have a wet April. So it's going to be wasted. So we will plan it around what's happening at the time. Brilliant. Kate's just shared the Met Office website there for Severity Index, and it's really good. And our data teams will look at that and keep us sort of posted as a community team as to what risks there are in our two counties. Anything from anybody else? Happy to add. It doesn't have to be related to just what we're talking about today with wildfires. It can be any concerns you may have within your communities, or if you want a bit of an insight. Yes, Nick.
Do you actually hold that anywhere? You talked about the resources that were involved in the South Devon fire. I mean, it would be very informative if we were able to access something like that for the major fire we had here in February. So we can put it in people's faces.
What do you mean? So some information about the incidents or the actual resources that we used?
Well, certainly resources. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can let you have that. There's also a lot of good information on our website as well.
Okay.
So if you'd like to access the Devon Somerset Fire and Rescue website, there's some really good bits on there and the stuff that you can use as community planners, emergency planners, and you can provide that information to anybody that's looking for it.
Thanks.
Jock.
Hi, yes. The area that I live in is predominantly agricultural land, a lot of crops. And I wondered what the incidence of fire in farm crops was and what were the major causes of it.
So one of the biggest, and again, it's a really resource heavy incident for us, and we're just doing a little bit of work around it now, is bonfires. So that's whereby the crops have been, or the hay and straw have been cut, and they've been stored in the barns a little bit damp, which then self-heats and causes bonfires. And there was only one last night in the Holsworthy area up in North Devon. And you're talking about many appliances and personnel to deal with that. So that's the main area with agricultural, is the bonfire. And it's very much like the wildfire, where it takes a lot of things from us as a service to deal with, and it's a very prolonged incident. So we do messaging around that, and there's some about to go out now. I've just helped with our comms team to put something together to go out to the local agricultural community. And again, it's getting those messages out there. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to get into the farming community with the right information. And we're doing a little bit of work with Devon County Council, and they got a trading standards team that are a part of the rural team, and they take some of our messaging out to the farms. The other area with agricultural incidents that we've had recently, it was a spate of arson attacks, and that was up in Somerset. So that's where there was farm outbuildings that were targeted by arsons or an arson. So we do a bit of work then around, again, with the farming community, just around security and thinking about making sure that the outbuildings are locked, or they've got some CCTV there, or there's not things lying around to tempt people to set fire to. Yes, Helen.
You just need to unmute.
Sorry, it wouldn't unmute. I remember in the past the profile for an arsonist was usually male, young, under 25 very often, and only 90% of them get away with it or never caught. I don't know, is that still the case?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, yes. And we always work very closely. Whenever there's arson involved, we always work very closely with the local community policing team. And very often they will have an idea who it is, or they'll have somebody in mind. And what we'll do is we will put up, in conjunction with the police, we'll put up what we call arson boards within that area, just saying, look, there's been an incident in this area. If anybody's got information, then please pass it on to the police. And that's not only for people to be able to pass that information on, it's also in the hope that the arsonist or the perpetrators will see these things in the area and know that something's being done to hopefully deter them from continuing. And that does seem to work quite well. So along, it gives that visual presence that something's, that we know that something's happening in the area and we're trying to do something about it. So that does work quite well.
Thank you. Are there any further questions at all?
Yeah.
Yep, Ruth?
It's a tie-in with the whole thing of people with limited mobility and things like that. It was just, I didn't know if there was any kind of part that you would like us to try and work with the fire service on, like your home visits.
Yeah, so that's a good one. So we are constantly trying to promote our home visits, which is a free service. And the good thing about home visit, not only can we talk to that person about all the home fire safety issues they may have and provide them with free equipment, but we can also log any mobility issues or anything like that, and we can enter that into our system. That way, when if a crew was ever responding to that address, they would have that information as to the capacity of that person. So that does work very well. So if you could promote our home safety visits within your communities, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything more? I think we've covered quite a few different topics here. So there's quite a few things to think about in terms of what you can put in your community emergency plan to maybe give it a bit of a boost, and also what you can do specifically around sharing social media content. I think be really, really useful in your communities. So if there's no further questions, I think I will leave it to really thank Steve for coming along and sharing this with us today, and for everybody who's joined in with the conversation, because I think that's made it a really useful discussion that we've had. So thank you all for coming along. As I said, I will be speaking to all of the speakers from today and asking them to send me over not only their slides, but also any resources that they've flagged throughout their talk, so that I'll be able to share it with all of the participants from the week of the 19th when I get back from leave. So look out for that email that will come from me, or Devon Communities Together anyway. So we've got one more session left today, which will be starting at 4 o'clock, which is Pathfinder Property Level Resilience. So I hope to see many of you over there as well. So thank you all for coming along, and thank you very much, Steve, for your presentation. Thank you.
You're more than welcome, and please forward any questions on to me, and I will pass on the information that you need to move forward.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye.